Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, make sure you go ahead and check out the Poketown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are reviewing the Sword and Shield set review. This is because I will be doing my Rebel Clash set review in 1 or 2 days' time, and in order to look at the new, we need to close the book on the old. So we're going to be looking at how I rated the cards initially, how they ended up performing in the few tournaments that we did actually have of this format, and also talk about how these cards might be changing with some new inclusions from Rebel Clash as well. So yeah, let's jump into it. We start off with Bead. I rated this a 2-star. Community seemed to be similar in their approach. This ended up not really working out too much. Sableye V was often cut from the Obstagoon based decks, as we just said that Instruct was the only win con of the deck. Morpeko seemed to be a flop just because of the amount of controlling Dole decks that ended up being in the format. Cinccino control was a really big player in this format, and it forced other decks to go towards custom catchers plus Pokemon catchers in many situations, or customs plus Orangaroo, these sorts of things, or even things like Snivysaur for gusting, and all of those things kind of pushed Morpeko out of the format. And also there was ADP, but they never really introduced the Bead. So this supporter, I think the 2-star for experimentation is still relatively fair. Also, I think this is once again going to be a card that could be re-explored as a potential one-of include in decks, now that we are getting that Eldegoss V, as well as the Scoop Up Net for a Mind Report Mewtwo combo alongside Orangaroo, where you can play some one-off supporters and they get a lot more value, because even if you just throw them into the discard pile early on with a research, it means that later on you can access them for a time where they're actually helpful. So I think supporters like this actually are getting a low-key kind of buff. Things like Team Yell, Bead, a handful of other like cards that are only good on certain turns, supporter-wise at least, do get a lot stronger. And I do think that there will be builds of Dragapult VMAX that do not play any Malamar for acceleration, but potentially add in one Bead, just so that you can beat Crushing Hammers, beat opposing Yell Grunts, stuff like that. So I think 2 stars fair. I think it could end up being in Dragapult, so it could end up being a much more used card, even though it will only ever be like a one-of index. Hop is obviously terrible. Marnie is indeed a 5-star card. The hype is pretty fair, pretty warranted. Now, the biggest thing on this slide that was missing was that it's just a good enough card in any deck. You can see that I was saying that it's a combination of Shauna and Judge, and that effect was just strong enough in the format. It's a 5-card dig for yourself deeper into your deck, which is great. Pikarom never really actually went towards this route. Pikarom oftentimes would prefer to just go turn 1 full blitz or bust, rather than having hand disruption options that we've seen previously with Judge Pikaroms. It's fair that Morpeko did play a very high count of money to disrupt custom catchers, but again, Morpeko ended up not being great. Mewtwo Malamar is a really interesting one. It was pretty heavily played in Japan in their meta, and didn't really convert very well over in the rest of worlds, which is quite interesting. That was obviously one of the biggest combos that we had coming out of the set, Marnie Trevnoir for just complete disruption. But in general, Marnie just stopping things like Blacephalon, the Baby Blounds, stopping Abilitizard, stopping most aggro decks in general, as well as hurting combo decks like Obstagoon, was good enough for it to see play as a 2-of in oftentimes ADP lists, at least a 1-of in ADP lists, I would say, guaranteed, even if you are the tag call package. So yeah, 5-star card. Going on in this format, I think again it will continue to see a decent amount of play. There are some decent supporters coming out in the new set, but I don't think much challenge Marnie or Research. Those are still the two like backbone supporters of the format, I would say. Pokekid obviously terrible. Research obviously busted. Yeah, the synergies again with stuff in the discard pile. Pikarom is sometimes playing this and sometimes not. There are plenty of lists out there that just play things like Cynthia's instead, because the discarding of customs and E-powers and stuff can be a little bit painful, but ultimately it's played usually as like minimum 2 count in Pikarom, I would say. it's obviously played in the Mewtwo decks. It even found its way into the Welder-based Mewtwo's, which is cool. And of course, it's a 4-of in ADPization. Sonia is going to be re-evaluated in the new set, but spoilers, it's not going to be higher than the 2-star. In fact, it's probably going to be lower. We've basically seen Oak and Elm be eradicated, even from the controlling decks. Previously, Elm was played heavily for like Pidgeotto and Florges and stuff like that, and Oak was played for similar reasons, and those have just been eradicated because quick ballingization is now the best way to get drawing cards as even control archetypes, so Sonia will probably not see any play. The only credit that we can give Sonia is that it can get you a turn 1 attachment onto an ADP, which is pretty valid, but I think that's all there is to it. I think oftentimes there are way better supporters to play. Team Grunt, I think it's fair to give this just the 1-star rating. Maybe you could give it a slightly higher one, because it saw some like fleeting play in some controlling decks in addition to Crushing Hammers, or as a sometimes one-of in like Luke Metal builds of Zacian, although Luke Metal really didn't perform in any real tournaments. So I feel like this card is going to get a huge buff from the Scoop Up Net Mewtwo combo or the Eldegoss V combo, because there are times in games where this effect will just completely change things for the opponent, force them to find, like an extra Saucer, force them to find extra like Pokemon Search to get energy into play, like extra Malamars, or making your Absol stronger. These sorts of things are all really excellent, and if there are going to be Dragapult builds that don't play any energy acceleration, this card is disgusting for them. And even if you just find this Grunt early against ADPs, like, it's good. So now that we have the recoverable nature of supporters, just every utility supporter becomes way better because you can utilize them at the right time. Makes sense, right? So yeah, I think Team Grunt stock is going way up. It's going to be a much better card, I think. Energy Retrieval, yeah, I think 3 stars pretty fair. Frostmoth never really became, higher than like a tier 3 archetype, I want to say. And Blounds wasn't always playing like a super high count of retrievals, but sometimes there was like 1 or 2. But oftentimes I think even the Jirachi Blounds don't play many of these anymore, so potentially even worth putting this a little bit lower, but I think 3 is pretty fair for this card. Energy Search, obviously terrible. Evo Incense saw a lot less play than initially expected. I was actually a little bit lower than a lot of the community, but I think it's fair to actually push this even lower. I think Evo Incense was like a 1 or 2 of in Goons, in addition to Pokecom. I also think it was barely in Magcargo. Obviously, the Nidoqueen Inteleon thing didn't really work out, nor did Lapras, so evolutions are just still not working. I think the only evolution decks that are really valid are like Magcargo and Goons, right? Or like Cinccino for control, that's about it. And I guess Cinccino did play a decent number of these, but then they had to whittle them away for tech cards, so it's not that Evo Incense is like necessarily that bad, it's just that we're in a situation where evolutions aren't great, and normally, because you can't support her on turn 1, Pokecom is just a much, much better card because it lets you transfer that useless stage 1 turn 1 to get the basic turn 1 to then actually have plays for the following turns. So Evo Incense is going to go down to a 3-star in my eyes. Yes, more VMAXs are coming out. There are more targets for this, but I think basically always we want to be putting in 4 Quick Ball, 4 Com first, and then it's like 1 or 2 Incense on top if you ever have the space. So I'm going to bump this down to a 3-star in my opinion. The only validity to adding in like 1 of Evo Incense over like Com is if you're going to use Rosa and you want to have that like guarantee of a Pokemon plus an Evo Incense compared to a Pokemon plus a Pokecom. So yeah. Fishing Rod, I think 4 stars again is pretty high. Let me think about what decks actually play Fishing Rod. It's like sometimes Blounds. Obstagoon definitely plays it. And Control. Yeah, maybe 4 stars pretty fair. I think because it's in Control and Goons, both were at least, well, I mean, Control was still tier 1 for me. And Goons was, tier 1 or 2. So, yeah, I think Fishing Rod's a pretty fair rating. I'm glad that I was very correct in identifying this card as a control card rather than this goes in every deck kind of card. You can see I'm saying that I remember talking through this being like, yeah, if you're actually playing like a VMAX or a tag team deck or even just a regular V deck, like you never play Fishing Rod because you'll have you physically have enough prizes naturally just to give up to your opponent before the game's over, before Fishing Rod's actually good. So yeah, makes sense here. Great card for control, and potentially in Goons, but really that's about it. Great Ball, I'm actually going to bump this up to the 3-star in line with community. I think it's played a little bit more just for exactly my cargo. My cargo does seem like a tier 2 deck to me, and it's also like valid in Obstagoon, just to give yourself better like ball search outs. I think that's the only real home for Great Ball right now. Going forward, I don't think there's much else that changes. But yeah, just because of the new supporter rule changes, it is vital for evolving decks to find multiple basics to put them onto the board. And sometimes they do go in addition to the quick balls and the comms. So yeah, I think it's a pretty decent card still. Hyper Potion, I rated it 2-star. I think we can bump it down to the 1-star. It basically saw no play. I think for the majority of the time, this is meant to combo off with VMAX Pokemon, and basically Snorlax kind of flopped. And that was going to be the main real receiver of Hyper Potion in my eyes. We had Malolana, even that was taken out of the format basically because of the nature of how much one-shotting was going on here. Basically because Zacian was able to reach 270 quite easily. Healing was no longer a valid option for tag team decks, and we didn't have enough good VMAXs at this point. So potentially this card gets a little bit better as more VMAXs get printed. Right now I'm a little bit skeptical of the card, so I'll keep it as... Nah, we're definitely bumping it for a 1-star for this format. Potentially a little bit better as more VMAX Pokemon come out. I think Hyper Potion is worth considering if you're going to try and play Cinderace VMAX, or if you're going to try and play Dragapult that does play Malamar, because you can get some healing in. Otherwise, I think Malolana is still just going to be better. Metal Saucer, easy 5. We know how busted Zacian is. We've got Pokemon Catcher. I rated it a 3-star. I think it's more fair to bump it to the 4. Because just the dominance of dolls, just how good control was, forced us to put Pokemon Catchers into our list. Also, in ADP Zacian mirror matches, sometimes Pokemon Catcher was just good enough because you go, give me your Zacian, I'll kill it with my Zacian, and then I'm super far ahead. Some interesting stuff is that the Will combo never actually worked out. That was something I was thinking about, and I'm thinking more about it now that the Eldegoss V thing is out. So I'm wondering if there's ever going to be a Crushing Hammer style deck that goes back to Pokemon Catcher, but now that we have Boss's Orders, there's probably never a reason to. So yeah, Pokemon Catcher was good in this format, but now that Boss's Orders comes out, I think we will not be seeing Pokemon Catcher for a little while, which is cool. Potion, obviously trash. Quick Ball, obviously busted. It's in everything, and it has brought back some of these basics. Fiona's seen a lot of play. Absol has seen a lot of play. Mimikyu has been in and out of some Zacian lists. I know at the OCIC it was played by like Bert to a top 8 finish and stuff like that, which is cool. Mew's been in a bunch of lists. We haven't yet started to see things like Zap Beast style engines coming back. We haven't really seen Hooper be used much in this format. We have seen a decent amount of Zigzagoon, and I think we'll see even more Zigzagoon now that Scoop Up Net's become a thing, so that's pretty interesting. And again, with the Zapdos thing, Scoop Up Net's back, so you have better flexibility for your attackers to reset your Thunderous Assault, so I'm expecting to at least try out some Zapdos stuff. It should be good fun, but yeah, Quick Ball, obviously insane. Rotom Bike is obviously garbage. Air Balloon, I think a 3-star is pretty fair. I think it's in exactly control as like a 2 of. And no other decks play this card, I don't think. Possibly some Mali Mewtwo's that aren't playing Jirachi. Although I believe the seniors list that actually did well at the OCIC did play Jirachi board. So I'm not too sure about how I want to rate this. If I want to rate it much higher. We haven't seen Dawnwings and Necrozma be a combo at all. Jirachi, for the most part, is still dominating the game. Sometimes Air Balloon makes its way into like a handful of decks as an alternative, but usually the Jirachi package is just way stronger, so I don't want to give too much credit to this card, especially because Mewtwo Mali isn't really like a top tier contender, I don't think, at least from the results we saw. Vital Band, or Fine Band at the time, we're going to have to bump it up to the 4 stars, I think. It wasn't in every ADP Zacian, but it was in enough where it's just like a good enough card. You can see I've got ADPization down there, and yeah, that was his home, right? Everything just wanted to hit 270. It was either Shrine or Vitality Band or both. If you had both, you could kill ADPs back with your own Zacian after you've GX, which is just crazy. It wasn't really used in any other situation, but yeah, you can see the Guzhala on there. Guzhala obviously isn't the only way of playing ADPization, as Tort has shown, and his list didn't play any Vitality Bands, to be fair. But just in general, I think, at least up until Malmo, the most popular build certainly did play at least one Vitality Band, sometimes 2 copies, so yeah. Giant Charm, I think, is fair at the 4-star. It's used in Mewtwo with Chaotic Swell and this card. It's used in Pikarom with Chaotic Swell and this card, just so that you have a fighting chance against Zacian. That's basically it. Giant Charm Swell became like the only response that tag team decks had in order to beat Zacian players, to stop them putting in labs, to stop them putting in shrines, and to stop them reaching on you for 4-prize knockouts. So yeah, Giant Charm, definitely a decent card. It was even played in some ADP lists. I know that Mehdi played it in his own ADPization alongside his own Swell to be tanky and mirror. So yeah, that's just how good Giant Charm is. I think as there's a bigger pull towards VMAXs, there's probably less reason to play Giant Charm because they basically come with a Giant Charm attached. Mewtwo probably gets a lot less good now that Dragapult's coming out in the format. I think Dragapult is directly going to be a big problem for that card. So there's potentially a little bit less use of Giant Charm going forward, just something to bear in mind, but pretty good for this format for sure, as people figured out how busted ADPization was and how important it was to be exactly that matchup. Lucky Egg, I rated a 4-star. I think it's actually more fair to drag it down a little bit. Most Blacephalon Lucky Egg builds ended up only playing like 1 copy, and that's partly down to how good Beastbringer is in the deck. So you can just kill an ADP for 4 prizes and then only have to deal with a Zacian. It was ended up being cut from Obstagoon decks, and that was initially one of the main homes that we saw Lucky Egg going into, and no other decks really adopted this card. Yes, we did see Zach Lesage come second at OCIC with the Lucky Egg, so in Zard, possibly you could say that it's worthy of the 4-star rating. But other than that exact tournament, Zard did like terribly since then. So I think it's okay bumping it down to the 3. In the new set, we do get Tool Scrapper. I don't think Tool Scrapper is going to see a huge amount of play because Garb's not in the format, and basically that was the only time Tool Scrapper did see play. So I think Lucky Egg isn't really hurt too much by the new set stuff, but I also still think the same. Like, Baby Blacephalon is still probably the best home for this card, and it's an exact one of in the deck right now. Lumberry sucks, Citrus sucks. Aurora is busted. It's exactly in Soulburst Mewtwo, which is great. It's also in ADPization as long as you're playing the Guzhala package, and that's basically exactly what we anticipated. Celebi, obviously terrible. Delmise, obviously terrible. I don't think that any of this stuff is going to change. Orbeetle is just way worse than Chip Chip, and as we saw, for the most part, Pidgeotto bowed down to the new Cinccino style approach, where you didn't play any hand controlling stuff, you just tried to aggro mill their deck, so control adapted in that way. Orbeetle will still end up being, well, it's just too many spaces to make it work in control, basically. Rillaboom ended up being exactly, I think, the 2-star, possibly up to a 3, if you're going to be generous, but in terms of actual tournament results, really, really poor. I think going forward, Rillaboom has a new one-hit KO guy, in that you can hit 280 with the Rillaboom VMAX. I think Rillaboom VMAX comes with a whole heap of his own problems that we'll get to in the set review. So I don't think Rillaboom's going to get much better, possibly up to that 3-star that a lot of people were initially voting it for. Its acceleration is super strong, and you do have Shining Vine available to you, which is interesting. Super Growth and the Tropical Lava GX wasn't really enough to make this a strong enough contender in the format. But possibly with a new one-hit KO style guy, this Rillaboom's going to start getting a little bit better. There's the Rillaboom V. Again, we now know what the VMAX looks like, so we can evaluate this a little bit better. Obviously, it did nothing in this format, but it's unfair to rate it until it's got its VMAX. And I can foresee Rillaboom with the VMAX probably being the best way to play Rillaboom, at least. And probably the best way to play Grass, but I don't know how strong. I still think it's a lot of setup, basically, so... Yeah, I mean, you're going to try and hit candy combos. When you're using the Rillaboom VMAX instead of Rowegg, you don't get the super growth synergy. So you end up using things like that Forest Feast early and then try and evolve up into your VMAX and use Turffield and stuff like that. But we'll get into that list at some point, I'm sure. But I think it's, like I said, it can hit hard, and it has a lot of hit points. So as long as it has answers to fire, you're going to be decent, I think. Cinderace, probably down to that 1-star. I don't think it's done anything, so yeah, it's still a stage 2. Even a stage 2 that can be self-sufficient and hits 190, basically for 1 attachment each turn, is still not good enough. It's pretty scary, especially with 170 hit points, but yeah, still not quite good enough. Cinderace V, again, it obviously wasn't better than Heatran in this format, but a VMAX is coming out and it has a couple decent attacks, so something to bear in mind. Torkoal V, rated the 3-star. I think it actually has to go down to the 2-star because most Magcargos took this out of their list in order to just play more aggression and more ball search, just to get the wombo combo or the ideal board state more often, I guess you could say. And I think for the most part, Zard chose not to play this, so I'm going to take it down to that 2-star rating. Because it was definitely an option in all these decks, but everyone said no to that option at the end of the day. And looking at Japanese results, a lot of the Magcargos were playing Torkoal. It does put a lot of pressure on the ADP because you can just stream crash them and then they're forced into their Zacians and they can run out of energies that way. So it's still an option in Magcargo, but just not an option that many people are taking right now. Victini V is indeed that 4-star. We rated it pretty high. Yes, it made it into Welder Mewtwo, did very, very well in Welder Mewtwo. Yes, it made it into Ability Zard, did okay in Ability Zard as well. So yeah, Victini very good for those reasons. It also found its way into some builds of Baby Blacephalon. I know Evenos List played it for sure, and a handful of others. So yeah, Victini V, super, super good card for any deck that can Welder. Just so much efficiency in Energy Burst, and Spreading Flames giving you that option if you're going to whiff Welders early is just too good to say no to, really. Ice Q is terrible, and I think it's either a promo... Have we got this promo yet? I don't think we've got the promo yet. It might be in the main set, I don't even know. But yeah, I'll probably have to re-rate this, but basically it's going to be the same rating. Frostmoth, I rated the 3-star, and you can see how much the community wanted this card to be busted. It was stage 1, Rain Dance, but I'm glad I stuck to my guns here and said that there weren't enough good receivers of Water Energy in order to be successful, and that's basically exactly the case. In the new set, we do get a new Water VMAX in Inteleon VMAX, but I'm still not certain that's going to be great. I think possibly the biggest push that Frostmoth can get in the next set is the full bucket trainer card that lets us tutor out 2 Waters. To basically help streamline what we already know in the Lapras list and the Keldeo lists. So we'll see how that functions. It'll basically draw a lot better than previously, but it might still have the same damage output issues that it's previously suffered. Inteleon, I rated the 3-star. I think we've got to bump this down a little bit. It's actually not been in anything really, which is really quite surprising. It's been like a rogue option, if you want, I guess, as a bit of tutoring. It really did surprise me as well because of how important things like Custom Catcher are in the format. But it's just the amount of space this guy takes up, which has been the main issue. So yeah, for how strong this ability is, I'm still flabbergasted that it's not seeing much play at all. There's just not really been any decks that have enough space to put him in. And possibly seeing how Alolan Ninetales has been out of the game for a while could have been a better indication of why this wasn't going to see a lot of play. But man, these effects are still quite strong, and I still want these in the binder the whole time. But I am going to bump him down to a 2-star for only exactly an experimental card right now. Inteleon V obviously was terrible. We do get a VMAX that might make him more interesting, but probably not. Keldeo V I rated 2-star. I think it's a little unfair. I think Frostmoth is overall like a tier 3 deck, so we'll bump him up to that 3-star. It's a valid option, probably the best actual way to play Frostmoth, to be honest. I think the drawbacks of Lapras are too much right now. Yes, you have tanking against exactly ADPization, but Frostmoth already can't beat control. It's bad against Pika-Rom, and it's, yeah, just pretty rough overall. So, like, not the most consistent of archetypes out there. So it has a bunch to struggle with. The Keldeo list worked a lot more often, and will continue to work even more with the full bucket coming out. So, yeah, I'll bump it up to 3 stars. Lapras VMAX, I'm going to bump down to 2 stars, just because it ended up that the Keldeo was better than the Lapras build for the most part, in my opinion. Just because of those hurdles that I mentioned. But yeah, Frostmoth still has more things to overcome in the new format. Seeking was a spicy hot meme for flipping coins and getting rid of energy cards. Don't think it actually saw any play though, so yeah. Boltund, obviously trash. Morpeko was one of the most overrated cards of this set review. I'm going to take it down to a 3-star because, like I said, it got caught in the crossfire for how good Dol is in the control decks. I think one of the key things of my set review that you'll notice is that I was saying that I think control is in a really bad spot. I don't see how Pidgeotto works anymore in the format, and that was completely true. It's just the fact that other control decks took over and they just didn't care about the board. They just went straight for your deck instead. So, yeah, Morpeko really got caught in the crossfire of more people being conscious of control and therefore adding more gust into the list. Made Morpeko pretty awkward. Looking at the Japanese tournaments, a lot of them were still playing just like 2 copies of Great Catcher, and that helped Morpeko be successful in their format. But we were all so hot on beating control that everyone was playing 4 customs, and everyone was playing additional gust or ways to get back those gust for the most part. So that made life very difficult for Morpeko. Also, there was some Crushing Hammer based. Like, it also struggled against control itself and Obstagoon because of disruption and just Goon being a bit of a wall. So all those things are worth noting as well. Coco V indeed was a 4-star. It sometimes was up to a 2 in Pika-Rom just for how efficient it was at dealing with Zacian to close out games. Had free retreat, always a nice pivot. So yeah, definitely a very, very strong card. Going forward, there's potentially a way of playing Boltund Coco, and you just cut the Pika-Rom for the list entirely, and you just try and focus more on Thunderous Bolt doing big numbers. So something to bear in mind. Also, there is a Toxicity VMAX deck that might also add in like 1 Coco just for early game draw potential, or just an attacking alternative. Galarian Rapidash, yeah, removing special conditions still is not important in the format. We have enough pivots, so it's not going to be needed for a while. Gengar, I don't think there's any good... Oh, there is good psychic stuff. There's actually Dragapult coming out in the new set. So something to bear in mind. It's a 1-star for now, obviously saw no play. But we actually do have a good VMAX. Ooh, exciting. A Dragapult that never dies. Interesting. Gengar, get a hold of him now. Indeedy, we rated a 3-star. I think 3 is still relatively fair, because it did make its way into the Soul Burst Mewtwo. It was still in Mali Mewtwo, although that didn't do too great. Basically, you can see here that the VMAXs didn't really do as well as planned, but Indeedy was still good enough in exactly Mewtwo that we're going to give it the benefit of the doubt here. The card is still pretty strong in a vacuum. So yeah, still an option for the most part. And yeah, as more VMAXs become relevant, the more relevant Indeedy gets, because you put things out of range, which is just nuts. Poltergeist, obviously trash. Wobbuffet down to a 1-star. I don't know why I believed in this card. Even with things like the Dragapult coming out in the new set, it's also going to be trash. Claydol trash. Grappaloct trash. Yep. Regirock trash. Rhyperior trash. Stonejourner. No! Stonejourner was underplayed, I'm telling you. I'm telling you this archetype was underplayed right now. I'm coming out and saying it. This was a decent deck, I think. But yeah, it just didn't really mature enough. I feel like if the format had more time to mature, this card would have been like played more and actually been successful, or relatively successful. With the chain of Zygarde, you did pretty well against Dol decks just because of early pressure for one thing. And like you would never skip a beat of attacking, which was really good. You were obviously very, very good against Obstagoon. you were okay against ADPization as well. I know one of my friends was trying it out with Crushing Hammers to try and make it favored. But yeah, that was maybe a little bit too far. But anyways, there was some fun stuff to explore with Stonejourner. In the new set, there is a Colossal, but I don't think you really want to commit more like stage 2s to this deck too much. I think you can just accept that Zygarde's still probably the best way to accelerate this guy. Yeah, I think Stonejourner was actually like criminally underplayed, especially because possibly as the format developed, because Pikarom did really, really well in Malmo. Like it was not really on par with ADPization, but it was carving its name out as like possibly the second best deck alongside Mill. Whereas in the OCIC, Pikarom only made a top 16 showing, which was way worse. So after Malmo, there was a bit of a more hype on Pikarom again. There could have been a nice little area where Stonejourner could have got a few cheeky results here and there. I'm not saying it's like crazy good, but it was like a well-placed deck. As we went further on, I think its only real issues would have been things like Baby Blounds going forward. I think that's probably like the only bad matchup for you, and random boomers out there. I think that's about it. Going forward, more VMAXs come out that are probably better than this card. So yeah, that's probably going to be an issue. Galarian Goons, we rated the 4-star. I think it's still actually pretty fair to give this a 4-star treatment. Like, it's certainly a presence in the format. It certainly has forced people to warp their decks, either by adding in Ultra Forest Car Envoy, or Evolutions, or Fion plus Customs, or a Rangaroo to confuse things, so many different ways, or Captivating Wink to force more things onto the bench so you can Gust again. Yeah, there's been a lot of things that we've had to answer and add into our decks to actually beat Obstagoon. That Obstruct attack is just absolutely gross, the added damage is just cool, and Galarian Zigzagoon might be pushing himself up to a 5-star just because of how good Scoop Up Net is in the future. So yeah, Goons certainly are good right now. The Obstruct attack is notably horrendous next set. I think Dragapult is going to be a big deal. Yes, you are hitting 180 against them, but even that's like not a great number. And they have additional sprinkles so that they'll start killing like your Zigzagoons in the back and you'll not have enough attackers. Or it's just going to make life difficult for you overall because they can take multiple knockouts all over the place. So yeah, I think we don't have to live in fear of Obstruct as much anymore. Possibly still a little bit, but yeah, the Zigzagoon comes into his element as just basically a new Crobat G. Nickit is a 1-star, still scary though. Sableye, overrated, I think. Yes, Wicked Claws was decent damage output. It's just the 2 attachments was so backbreaking in this format where, again, everyone was committing to custom catchers over great catchers and Fion, which was the big question mark going into this format where Gust would end up being. And I think just because of control, everyone had to go towards the custom catchers and basically had no choice in that, which made the Sableye way less safe on board. That just meant they die a little, like a lot easier and gave up those easy prizes. And we basically just tunneled towards Obstruct instead, which I think is pretty fair. But notably, this was in the list that made top 8 of OCIC, I'm pretty sure. Toxicroak is a poison buff. Poison's not good. We do get a Garb in the next set, but you're not going to play multiple stage 1s just to put 30 damage on things. Copperaja, yeah, is pretty poor, even with those horrendously strong stats. Imagine a 240 hit point thing that can hit 220 being bad for 1 prize. Well, yeah, it's still not good enough. Pretty crazy overall. But yeah, just too much setup, too much work for this guy. Galarian Berserker, I rated the 3-star, and that was looking towards this Meowth promo actually being in the set, and we didn't actually get this card just yet. I'll be re-evaluating the Galarian Meowth on its own, but I think the 3-star rating probably a little bit high. We'll put it down to the 2-star right now, but again, it's probably back to this 3-star status when we look at the Galarian Meowth. It just gives us great tutoring to find this Berserker, and then suddenly we're having better damage modifiers for this ADPization. You're a lot less concerned about things like your Shrine coming into play, so you're less worried about other people swelling you. So yeah, I like the option of Berserker. I think he's going to be okay going forward now that we can tutor him out with a Meowth a little bit easier. I think it might end up being stronger than committing towards Vitality Band. And another good thing is that when you don't need to play Vitality Band and you don't need to play Shrine, you can cut the Guzhala package from ADP and you get to go spin a Acrobike, which, as we know, is pretty strong for the early game plays. So this Meowth lets us change the entire engine of Zacian to go more Tord style and possibly have more consistent opening turns, which is a very good deal. So yeah, this Meowth is definitely going to be strong and make Berserker that. It might turn it into even like a 4-star card. Stunfisk, never really saw much play. Zacian V, easiest 5 of your life. This card is just everything we wished for and more. The only thing that I missed on this slide was how good this card is just to draw the 3. I only really put things where it's attaching extra energies and being an attacking presence. I didn't think of him as a Tropical Beach style effect, which he certainly is and has done to help make control decks super, super strong. Zamazenta, I rated that 2-star. I think it may end up becoming that 2-star eventually. Right now, though, the VMAX is all flopped, so it's sort of basically no play. Cinccino, I rated 3 stars. Really because I thought there was enough competition for this card out in the format where it wasn't going to be a big deal. But it turned out that it stomped the competition and ended up making its own controlling archetype. Cinccino really wasn't played in much else other than its own deck, Cinccino Control. So I can see why I rated it a little bit low. Everyone else was a little bit more hype on it though, fair play to them. Also, there was the more Peko Cinccino deck that Yaneda played, but that's really about it. So yeah, Cinccino up to, I think, 5 stars because it is the namesake of the deck and is like a 4/4 of in the deck, and is the reason why it works. So yeah, Cinccino up to a 5-star for sure. Control going forward, I haven't given much thought to it, but it's still probably okay. Aggroing a bunch of cards out of your deck is still a hard strategy to beat for a few decks. Cramorant V, I rated that 3-star. I think 3-star is pretty fair. It's in exactly Baby Blacephalon now. I don't think it's in any other decks. Possibly like Rillaboom. I think that's about it. So yeah, as you can see, I said that there's all sorts of ways you can try and accelerate this guy, get him rolling. Rillaboom, pretty poor. Malamar never really wanted this in the deck. The Welder decks, for the most part, Zard never needed this. But for Blacephalon, it was okay. Especially because it had that beat catch to stop you from bricking in the opening turns. So yeah, I like Cramorant for that. I think going forward, Dedenne is still obviously a very, very good card. So Cramorant still has that exact same utility. So it's not going to change too much. Still a decent card and exactly Blounds right now. But it's still like a 61st or 2nd card in a few other decks. Meowth, obviously trash. Noctowl, obviously trash. Oranguru, easy 5-star, busted boy, absolute beast. This card is so crazy good. It made Magcargo GX actually a thing. Crazy in Zacian, and is like a consideration card in Pikarom and a few other things here and there. The Oranguru might be getting even better in the next set when we have Scoop Up Net plus Mind Report Mewtwo as a combo. So he can cheat you into a Versus Seeker style effect, which is pretty insane. So yeah, I think Oranguru potentially gets even stronger in the next set. Crazy times. Snorlax V VMAX I rated 3-star. Unfortunately, we're going to take him down to the 2-star. It's really strange to see a 340 hit point absolute monster not see any play, really. But yeah, that's the case. I think it's just the way the format ended up going. Snorlax didn't really have a lot of space for other pieces. You need to fill up your entire board and find a triple acceleration or find Welder. Both those comes with their issues. Welder not letting you draw a bunch of cards. And the 3C just being a 4-of that you have to dig towards. So either way, it's going to be a difficult way to get towards this 210. And 210 isn't a good enough number anymore, which is, again, wild. But there you are. So, yeah, Snorlax down to that 2-star. Busted and expanded, as we know. But, unfortunately, not great in Standard. So, yeah, that closes out the set review, guys. There's the summary there. Obviously, some new updates going on. Hopefully, this was interesting. Get you in the mood for the Rebel Clash set review. Give you a bit of insight into how I'm thinking about the new cards from the set as well. Bit of a taster really of how the new set's going to look. So yeah, look forward to that, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the set review. Thanks so much for watching.